Hello, welcome back to All Along the Watchtower, hopefully the best Watchmen podcast you can find on the internet. I'm your host, Baylor Thornton, and I'm joined once again by my friend, TG Lynn.
Hey everybody, what's going on? It's good to be back.
Now, you cut off last time abruptly, so do you have anything else you want to say about the first three episodes?
Well, nothing too significant. Besides from, I'm starting to get a bit more better context on the reigning squids here with these next three
Yeah,
episodes. So
yeah.
really, besides from that, I can't really. I think we covered up most of what I had to say.
Okay. Now, a few housekeeping things before we dive into the next three episodes. One, some friends of mine have decided what the next run of episodes is going to be, since the next episode we're doing is the last Watchmen one for a little while. So the next show we're doing is called The Power of Love, and it's the entire Robert Zemeckis filmography. I
Oh
really look
boy,
forward to doing that.
man, oh man, I have to look into that myself. I've seen the name Zemeckis tossed around, but
Yeah.
I'm not too familiar with any of his works.
Back to the Future, Roger
Oh,
Rabbit, Forrest Gump.
oh, you see, I didn't. That actually sounds like a pretty good run right there.
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff going on there. So look forward to doing that in the next few weeks. And also,
Nice.
you notice a new poster I have
Mm-hmm.
because the first issue of the new Rorschach comic just came out, Tom King's new series, and it's not bad. I want to see where it's going. First issue, it's kind of a slow burn, but that's okay if they can deliver on a good mystery in the coming issues. The
Right.
it's consistent with what the original comic and this show set up, while also doing its own thing. Has very much a noir influence and the artwork going on there. It's about it takes place in LA, and it's sort of like Citizen Kane in that like the main event happens first, and this like detective tries to go back and figure out what happened and why, and
Okay.
and so, and so the new Rorschach, it's obviously not Walter Kovacs because he's dead, but it's this new character named Will Myerson, and he's very much a parody of like Alan Moore and especially Steve Ditko, which makes sense considering how the original character was always a parody of Ditko's characters, The Question and Mr. A.
Mm.
And so this goes much further into that, and that straight up makes Rorschach like a comic book writer who's also a political extremist. And
Nice. Gotta keep something in line with how Rorschach's uh, ideologies go. Gotta love having an extremist as a hero or
yeah,
as a main character.
yes. But instead of a far right extremist, there's hints towards this new character, this new Rorschach, being a far left extremist. And I'm not sure exactly where they're going with that, but I'd like to see
Mm-hmm.
what the view on that is, because
I wonder if he'd be all if he'd be American or if he'd be foreign in some if he's from another land,
yeah, they haven't said
another
yet.
country. Excuse me.
Yeah, they haven't said that so far, and this is not a spoiler. This happens in the first page. He dies in the opening of the first issue. Both him and his accomplice, the kid, they try to assassinate this controversial political candidate, and it's botched. They die in it. So I'd like to see exactly where the story goes from there, because I'd imagine there's something else going on. It can't all be flashbacks. I don't think.
Maybe it's got some sort of interesting, then and now kind of how they show the scenes.
Yeah,
I'd be interested in seeing something like that.
yeah, I think it's going to be like mostly flashbacks because both original Watchmen and the TV show Watchmen, like the actual like plot only happens in about a week, but the narrative like goes across many decades.
It does.
Yeah,
It
so
does.
I think this is going to do something like that too. Oh
All
damn,
right. Well, yeah. There's. Sorry about that. I
that's fine.
stay on the same. I stay on the main street of a small town, so
Damn.
any kind of emergency services just comes through parading.
Okay, okay. And another interesting thing that they're doing is that because the original comic book was always implicitly about comics and comic book history, they're bringing that back both with the Rorschach Ditko stuff, and also
Mm.
there's this whole segment where you see this recording of Otto Binder and Frank Miller holding a seance to contact Otto Binder's late daughter, and that actually happened. That I didn't know this until I looked it up. But that actually happened. Otto Binder and Frank Miller actually did that. So I'd like to see what other weird things they're doing with comic book creators and how that ties into what this new Rorschach is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I am interested in seeing just the sheer volume of coverage that Watchmen is getting here with the show and just in general with I believe something else was coming up as well.
I think
It might not have been.
there's rumors of Injustice 3 having Watchmen characters too, but that has yet to be confirmed.
I wonder if it's. I think that might have been what it was. I knew it was something as far as the character showing up somewhere. It was in a sparse reach of the internet that I found it.
Yeah, they've been indulging in a lot of different things in the past few years, which is weird because for decades it was untouchable, but ever since the movie came out, it opened the floodgates.
Yeah, that is how. It's how Hollywood likes to open up stories.
Mm-hmm.
They wait until somebody finds the potential in it to make more money, and next thing you know, we have everybody else trying to impart their creative license into it. I
Yep.
think it's a pretty good fit in some cases, though.
Yeah, I'm glad it happened for Watchmen, even though there's a lot of bad stuff that I've covered on this show. We're getting into the first true sequel, I'd say, to the book, which is this show. So let's dive into the next 3 episodes.
All right,
Episode
let's get
4.
into it.
Oh, sorry. Episode 4 begins with eggs. This farmer selling eggs, and it's the second time we've seen eggs on this show because episode 2 ended with that Beach Boys song about rotten eggs. So that's
Mm-hmm.
setting up a motif that's going to be important later. And the eggs in this scene represent fertility because Lady True, we finally meet Lady True. She comes in and she wants to buy these farmers' entire plot of land in exchange for a genetic clone of their child that they would have had if they weren't infertile. And Lady True is very shrewd and manipulative, but she's also like smart as a whip and very charismatic. This is the kind of person that gets $1 trillion, as she says she's a trillionaire.
Mm-hmm. That was quite the first line
Mm-hmm.
when they trying to get an idea for who she was. And, yeah, you're a millionaire. No, actually, I'm a trillionaire. She
Mm-hmm.
just gets straight. She gets straight to business. I thought that was it. It shows pretty well how she can uh, influence power, how she can take control of the situation.
Yeah.
It makes me curious as to what she's gonna do, how she fits in with uh, Angela's grandfather.
Yeah, because at the end of the episode, we see that they have some sort of partnership. Yet,
Mm-hmm.
yet, if we know anything about Will, is that you always have to take it with a grain of salt, as he straight up gets up and walks off his wheelchair.
Yeah,
So
that was.
you
No,
never
go
really
ahead.
know
Go
when
ahead.
he's lying.
That was very surprising.
Yeah, that was great.
Watching all that, I definitely was taken for a loop with the pills, the nostalgia that he left with Angela as well. How towards
Yes.
the end of uh, that whole trip, she started to see how everything with Judd actually went down. You would think
Yes.
if he could stand up from his wheelchair, you thought he would have done something, would have done it himself. No, he got Judd to do it.
Nope. Went back to the mesmerism conspiracy.
Mm-hmm.
So, last thing I want to say about this farm scene is that Lady True straight up threatens to incinerate the baby if they don't accept in the next 30 seconds, which, along with the stuff with VIII and how he's murdering all these clones left and right, and with episodes 5 scene with the puppies, it shows how much that even though like cloning technology has it vastly improved in the last few decades, there's also a massive amount of cruelty that goes along with it. Like these clones are not considered real beings.
Which is terrifying to see acted out on the screen because these are human actors that are going through it. It
Yeah,
really shakes up that whole sci-fi debate about how to treat clones.
right.
Which, in all respect, is a good question because you know what are we besides genetic copies?
Right.
Genetic copies of information that may or may not have evolved from the last set.
Yeah, that's all DNA is. So why not? Why aren't clones considered real people or animals?
And I think, especially with VIII, um, it shines a bit of a light on that. I think it creeps me out personally to see how he's just so unflinchingly used to it,
Mm-hmm.
used to the treatment of them.
Because there's that scene where he's in the river, fishing through whatever clones he can find, and like they're like these little like clone babies, and he picks up some of them and lets others of them drown in the river. It's
Yeah,
kind of funny, but it's also really disturbing.
it is. It kind of goes back to that wacky lunacy that he's got that you were talking about last episode. He's you know he's Trevor from GTA 5.
Right.
I know I've mentioned GTA last time too, but every time I see this guy and how he's going about the antics that he's coming up with, they seem
Mhm.
like antics. It only seems like something you see in an online lobby. In GTA 5, it's wild.
Right. And there's also, we see in these episodes that there's some sort of sense that he's planning all of this, because in
Mm-hmm.
the first episode, he looks at Mr. Phillips, who tries to hand him a horseshoe, and he goes, "Mr. Phillips, that is a horseshoe." And in episode 4, you see again, there's Mr. Phillips dead on the table with a horseshoe in his hand, and Vi angrily goes, I don't need it yet. So some sort of sense that he's trying to give all these people instructions,
Mm-hmm.
which goes back into the first episode where he says, I'm writing a play. Maybe the watchmaker's son was not the play. Maybe everything we're seeing is his play.
That's what I was starting to. That's what I was starting to suspect too, especially towards the end. I believe it was the end of episode 4 when was it episode 4 or 5 that he tried to make the escape.
Episode 5 is when he goes to the moon.
Okay, yeah, I'm jumping ahead then. That's on me, but I definitely because it is VIII, of course, and the way that he elaborated on everything, in the original story, it does make sense to suspect that this might be a grander scheme.
Mm-hmm. Because he always likes to think 10 steps ahead.
Mhm. This man plays chess, not checkers.
Right. Okay, so. And we see this like meteorite or something crash in the field when but as soon as True buys the plot. And she's talking about legacy throughout this whole monologue. And at the end, she says, and that is mine. So we see that they're setting something up with that.
Hmm. I was definitely really curious about that too. Something so distinct as to fly out the sky. She looks at it as if she knows exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It does leave you curious, wondering what is it that you've got coming from Space Amazon? That's the package is here.
Mm-hmm. And continuing with legacy, we get another scene at the reparations center where Angela picks up the acorn and discovers her family tree. And it's an amazing bit of acting because Regina King, who's amazing in this show, she is
Hmm.
all sorts of emotions in this 1 minute: confusion, anger, sadness, and also gratitude, all in this one scene. It's really astounding.
And what I liked so much about the scene was just her starting to learn more about her grandparents and her grandfather's parents as well.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing how they had the photos. For one, I thought was actually very impressive, just as far as how a center like that has been set up. That they create holographic copies, of any sorts of files that they have, so you could get a very a physical feel for what your ancestors must have, what their presence would have looked like.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that must have helped a lot too.
Right. Because, yeah, she thought it was all lost to flames due to the massacre, but turns out
Mm.
there's one remnant of it left, which, like, yeah, I can't imagine what that must feel like to find one photo of this guy and try to connect the pieces. Why is he here now? Which she does
Mhm.
later on in episode 6.
Yeah, she does. And at one point, I did start to wonder. The more I watched about Angela in particular, her learning about her family, um, the more often I think of, just, in the real world, Black ancestry.
Mm-hmm.
It's, you hop on to social media and you jump onto some topic regarding Black people. And, if it's relative enough, somebody will mention, a role that their grandfather might have had, or a role that, their great aunt was doing, or, just even something as simple as what their dad or their mom did growing up. And it starts to give you uh, more like what you were just saying, an idea of what legacy is about. How Lady True at the beginning was mentioning that it's more in the blood and not so much. Did she say it was in the blood and not the land? I think it
Something like that.
just rings up to it. I think it's a nice reminder.
Mm-hmm. And when we get back to the house, I know you said you were interested in what Topher is going to do. Did you get any of that in these next 3 episodes?
I definitely like how he took up a bit of a guardian role, lesser guardian role in the family, despite how he's feeling about the recent events, such as like Judd blowing up. Um, he when Angela goes into the room and he's there with them and they're having that talk,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of made me think, this is kind of like what a kid would do. This is the kind of conversation a kid or maybe even a young teenager would have with their parents, so as to get a better understanding of kind of like some of this trauma that they just witnessed, some of the mess that they just seen. And the scene ends with Angela being just as vulnerable with them in turn. And he gives her, what was it, a unicorn, a stuffed animal of
Mm-hmm.
some sort, to help her with her fear. And it's, of course, that's what the son would want to do, for the mother, the maternal figure, or even the paternal figure, if they felt that the father needed any kind of protecting. But
Mm-hmm.
I honestly thought it shows a lot about his strength to me personally. It seems to be getting stronger and stronger with each episode, and I'm happy to see that going on with Topher.
Cool. And at that same time, we see a bit more of Cal, and he has this really off-putting line where he says, "Girls, heaven is just pretend." First, Judd was
Yeah,
nowhere. Then he was born. Then he was child. Then he was an adult. Then he died. And now he's also nowhere. Who wants waffles?
that is quite the switch up, and it makes me think, as like a parent, that's just got to be. Maybe that's just the way that people have like talks like that. They just like quick, simple, out the way. Who wants breakfast?
Right.
And just hope that the kid gets past it. I actually was hoping to see more of a reaction or some sort of processing from the girls actually after all that, but they kind of just went with it too and was all excited for waffles. Um, I'm curious to make it makes me wonder how the three kids all together are going to start looking at tragedy.
Right.
You have Topher acting like this, and then you have the daughters taking taking news like that in stride. You know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not going to give it away, but that line makes more sense in episode 7. I'm just going to
okay,
put that out there. And
all
then we
right,
get a scene with Wade. We first see his silo and all these Polaroids he has of the squids showing his deep-rooted obsession with them.
mm.
And they both call each other weirdos. And
Except I like how Will so elaborately put his how he said he's like, and I'm sure that I don't, because he didn't just out front and say it. He kind of said it in a bit of a
you
I don't
understand
know.
the
I don't say
hypocrisy of that
words.
statement?
Yeah, that's just real. That's a real classy comeback.
Mm-hmm. And then in this scene, we finally understand what nostalgia is. Well, one that goes
Hmm.
back with the comic book and how this franchise has always had like a deep rooted obsession with nostalgia, with because Adrian Veidt's like perfume and clothing line in the comic book was also called Nostalgia. And Lady True, when she took up Veidt's company, she made this medication for dementia patients called Nostalgia, where you can essentially relive your memories. But it was outlawed because people started abusing it. And
Yeah.
we see two people in this show use that. Use nostalgia. At the end of episode 4, we see Beyond, Lady True's daughter. We see that she has been that Lady True has slipped in these nostalgia pills every night, so Beyond can understand her past. And of course, there's the whole episode 6 that we'll get to in a second.
And I was actually really interested in seeing that development for Lady True's daughter as well. I was kind of off put by how she was introduced into the show, how she sort of just let the those people to her mother. It felt real strange at first, and when you come to realize that that's her daughter, it makes you wonder all that more about, first of all, their relationship. Second of all, their working relationship, because while she's a daughter, she also seems a bit more of like an assistant or an intern or something.
Yeah. And I'd like to say that we actually first see Beyond in episode 2. You don't notice it, but she actually does show up at the newsstand scene. So, just like the original comic, they always throw us stuff in the background.
Oh, I do remember that. You're right. And I love how, on that note, I also love how they made the comic stand or the newsstand a recurring thing from the comics as well too, and from the movie. I thought that was really interesting. That regardless of where you go, that's the center of gossip.
Yeah, because there's no internet. That's all you can say. And I still love that scene where it's very internet, where the guy is saying, "Oh man, Robert Redford and his Libstapo is going to hush up the free press," and then, but oh no, I don't trust Senator Keene either. I don't read it. I don't believe it. I just read it. That's very much like an internet opinion, like all sides are wrong, that you'll see like on Reddit or something.
It's one of those real snobby opinions. No, you gotta love it though, and I'm glad, like I said, that it pops up like that, because so there's got to be some sort of gossip around this stuff that can't be taken for serious in such a darker setting. You got to appreciate a little bit of the hot talk.
Yeah, I do like how this show has nuance with like the dark stuff and just the underlying humanity. That's something that the comic does well, and this show faithfully replicates. And going back to the silo scene, Wade initially defends Judd when Angela tells him that he was a racist. Wade's first reaction was he was a white man in Oklahoma. But as soon as he sees the Klansman robe, he immediately backs off and accepts that there's something off with this guy. So it shows that even though Wade himself is a white man in Oklahoma, he does have, I would say he has the highest like standard of morality of anyone in this show.
I would definitely say so. He's a bit more technical about being legalistic, and I like how he employs that, even with oh my goodness, even with Agent Blake, how she was wanting to get Angela Abar out of the scene. Try his damnedest. Will wasn't able to do. he wasn't able to stop her from that. And he pulled out all the stops from what it looked like at first, and trying to defend his friend. But going across someone like Agent Blake, it's not much
Right.
of it.
He's eventually put in a situation that he's eventually put in a lose-lose situation that we'll get to in a second.
Mm-hmm.
But first, we have to talk about Lube Man.
Man, that was freaky and funny as hell. Just some man in all silver spandex just staring at you, witnessing something that's supposed to be discreet. Then there's that awkward getting caught kind of silence. He just runs off.
Slides into the gutter.
It sounds to me, I'm sure you're probably familiar with tabletops and everything. It sounds like a D&D encounter.
Right.
Like a mysterious D&D encounter. Someone you're just not familiar with sees that. I chase after him. It's like after, running half a city block and going across here, he oils himself up and he escapes into the nearest grate.
And for me, for me, the funniest part of this scene is just Angela's reaction, because so many of the best moments of this show is just Regina King's delivery of "What the fuck." She just does it perfectly.
Yeah. She starts and ends the chase with that, and I feel like that's exactly how like anybody would have reacted.
Mm-hmm.
You start off, "What the fuck," and then you end, "What the fuck." The fuck.
Now, who do you think Lube Man is?
I've honestly got no clear idea. I want to say, if I could guess, maybe some sort of associate of Lady True's and her grandfather.
No.
If I'm just shooting, like spitting in the wind here, I never gave it an idea. Someone popping up just that mysteriously, it could be anybody or an associate of anybody's, but
They don't say it in the show, but in the in-universe text that you can find on PDpedia, the website, they do hint that it is Agent PD who does that. So,
oh man, and you know what? I wouldn't be surprised at all.
right?
Just with his build and everything,
Yeah,
gets away real easily.
yeah. Considering how much of a nerd he is for the whole superhero thing, that is definitely something he would do.
That's his superhero get up. I wonder if he even. I'd wonder what his name would be. He heard Lube Man and decided to stick with it.
Right. And then we get to the police investigation, and you see that it's way too cavalry oriented. They're just way too focused on just the few cavalry symbols that they're never this investigation is never going to go anywhere because they're not willing to get to the actual root of the problem. And we especially see that in how they treat lettuce, because lettuce essentially becomes a hate symbol for the 7th Cavalry when it's literally just lettuce. It has nothing to do with anything. So it just shows how both police investigations and just overall just associations with far right groups just leads to so many dead ends.
Yeah, what I thought was particularly interesting was seeing how it seems that there's a bit of an underlying affiliation among some groups of the police officers. This sort of, don't see, don't hear, don't say anything kind of attitude about some of the cavalry-related incidents.
Right. We definitely see that with Judd and all of episode 6. That all goes into the underlying link between the police and like essentially these Klansmen.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It it's not too far off, but
Absolutely not.
seeing it doesn't seeing it reminds me exactly of how just brotherhood can be, a good thing, and then there could be a bad thing within the good thing, all due to the reason of brotherhood. You're thinking that you've got the entire force with you when you find out that a few key members of the police force are actually end members of some smaller, more tighter knit group.
Right. Because we see that in the A-Bar family dynamic, because we see that all these cops are essentially consider each other family members, to the point where Angela and Cal adopted some of the late police officers' kids, and
Mhm.
which is great. They have an amazing relationship. Yet also they consider Judd their uncle when he never really was. He always had more nefarious motives. So that goes into the duality of this connection.
Hmm. Absolutely, because he seemed to have worn the family role really well. Not at all when he's on screen would you have suspected him of having these plots. At least not that sinister until until the nostalgia scene comes up. Um, and it's only when he's dead and people are literally going through his closet, that people start to get that creeping, like, oh, maybe it's not all glitter and sunshine.
Mm-hmm. So then we get to the scene with Lori and Angela in the car, and they have the first
Mm,
of several monologues about masks, because Lori says people wear masks due to some personal trauma, and which is true. Whenever you see a comic book, like the superhero always has some sort of origin story, like that due to
mhm.
something that wronged them. And what is the real world answer to that? Systemic injustice. This show goes into how that would be a superhero origin story of sorts.
Yeah, I personally thought that it was interesting in seeing. I liked seeing the tie-in from the ending of episode 3 up to episode 4. That sort of connection,
Oh yeah, that was
because
awesome.
it seems to have the continuity is interlocked in that way. Just from a change of perspective, Angela Abar is in the the center. Just as Agent Blake is outside making that phone call, the one that we heard throughout most of, was it episode 3, I believe,
Yes.
the to Dr. Manhattan. So honestly, the mild film enthusiast that I am was excited to see that kind of continuity go on like that between across episodes, and going on what you were saying into what felt personally, Agent Blake doing the tradition, signature, grilling move, just kind of getting a bit into Angela's business,
Mm-hmm.
uh, into some of this masked business. What are you doing out here, and doing all this work, and you know,
Right.
why you wearing this get up?
Right.
It's very vigilante catcher of her.
Yeah, she always likes to dig deep into what people are doing, as you see whenever they speak to each other. And
Yeah, she holds nothing back, even when you kind of guess that she might.
right. Then they
Go.
go
Mm-hmm.
to Lady True's office, and you see that she's the one that picked up the car with the flying thing inside the base.
Mm-hmm.
And you meet Beyond as we meet Beyond as you said, and when she's at well, we've seen the Doomsday Clock several times before in this show, and in the skyline, but this is the first time we ever actually see it. And there's
Mm-hmm.
building this giant skyscraper looking thing, and when Beyond is asked what it does, she just says it tells time, which is absolutely not true. But what else? How else are you going to find out the answer?
Yeah, it boy. I definitely like seeing that reveal. Honestly, the design is pretty awesome to me.
Right. Yeah.
Seeing that she's just kind of being built in the middle of just in the middle of Oklahoma, all that field, or what I'm guessing is all that lot.
Hmm. And we get the scene where Angela and Lady True meet. And it's interesting because just like the VIII Terradome in Antarctica, she brought a Terradome over to here in Oklahoma so that it can always
Mm,
so that she can simulate what it's like to be in Vietnam per her mother's wishes. And that establishes a connection between her and Angela because they were both from Vietnam and they both can relate to some sort of injustice going on there, both due to Angela's history with anti-black racism and Lady True's sure history of colonialization. In this universe,
mm,
Vietnam is a state, and Dr. Manhattan murdered millions of Vietnamese soldiers. So
yeah,
it's interesting that they're establishing this connection so early.
yeah. It came to me. It was a shocking reminder that they have that they both have that background because it seems to be something that you could you can already just guess, but it's not exactly made apparent that they would have shared that connection.
Hmm.
Um, and so seeing that I thought was really interesting, and I think it helps Angela understand a bit more about where her grandfather is coming from. That he has allies in
Hmm.
Vietnam like that, or Vietnamese allies like that.
Hmm. So then we get to the fight scene, which you already talked about. But last thing I want to say is the way it ends, the way the transition zooms out from the sky, suggesting that he's somewhere in outer space.
Man, I thought that was interesting, seeing that there was a he's in some sort of space prison.
Right. And
That's got to be interesting little cast off.
right, and the scene is introduced with the statue of him, with Blake saying he looks so old, and True saying he is old, suggesting that maybe that's him in the statue.
Well, I definitely thought that seeing the statue of him, to me it evoked something strange because I never really, how somebody would how a group of people would stick to a person or an ideology, and I didn't really sit and think about uh, Adrian Bite's impact on Vietnamese people until I saw how she was speaking about him. right before they showed the statue. The statue itself, I thought, was very interesting. Like you said, it does kind of look and sort of imply that he is in it, or that there's some sort of uh, something quote unquote living or breathing, something active inside of that thing. It just has a sort of it feels like it's got a greater significance than what the look of it implies.
Mm-hmm. So that's all I have to say for this episode. Do you have anything else?
I don't think so. No.
All right.
No, I'm excited to hop into episode 6.
First, I have to talk about 5, which is almost as good.
Yeah, episode 5 is great. Episode 5 is great. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say we get to do the next 2 episodes we talk about are 2/3 of the Holy Trinity. The 3 best episodes of the show, we're talking about 2 of them right now. So, episode 5
Definitely be happy to agree.
begins in the 80s. Like, it's the only scene that actually takes place during something in original Watchmen. And we see 11-2 in all of its horrific glory. Because remember, the movie really skimped out on the whole ending because they didn't show the squid. It was just kind of a bunch of buildings getting exploded. It was kind of like, okay, so. But here in this scene, it established that, yes, it can translate to film, and it is horrifying.
Man, watching that, it was pretty horrifying. That kind of instilled something in me that I failed to have gotten from actual horror movies in some cases. Seeing how our friend Looking Glass, how he was come to be born, just from something like that.
Right. Because we see here that he was there in Hoboken on some sort of like religious like expedition. It makes sense that when he was younger, he'd be some like Jehovah's Witness or something like that. He's going out to this like carnival boardwalk to get some recruits. And in doing so, the Knot Tops are fucking with him, and one person tries to take him in and tries to seduce him when really all she's doing is removing his pants, which
Yeah,
goes into his whole fear of sex that he certainly has throughout, similar to Rorschach. And
man, she did do him. She did do him dirty. I think that's any teenage boy's worst nightmare is seeing something like that happen, or is having that happen. And
yes,
there couldn't have been a better time because the world basically reset right after. So
right. And right when that happens, he's in the the Hall of Mirrors, which explains his mask and his persona Looking Glass. It shows how affected he is by this scenario, this little incident. And next thing you know, all of the mirrors break around him. He steps outside, everyone's dead. He screams, "What happened?" And it pans out to New York City, and the squid dropped right there while New York is playing. It is amazing.
yeah, just and getting to see the giant squid, getting to see the crux of 11-2 on film is also pretty profound as well. More so than just seeing the impact that it's had, and how some folks like Will survived the psychic blast. Seeing the squid itself, it's something that in the comics was something that you stop looking through the comics just to see what the scene itself was. And I was curious as to what that would have looked like on the screen as well on film, and it turned out to be more gruesome than I had imagined.
Oh yeah,
And it sets it perfectly for how that's such a how big an event that was, how
Yeah,
catastrophic it was.
yeah, because in the comic
Hmm.
book it looks like this. So
Yeah,
yeah, you would. Yeah,
it was.
only makes sense for the filmed depiction to be that disgusting and like gory because the movie did not have that. They didn't think it would translate well, but shows they were wrong. And also, and okay, going from New York, it's this perfect transition to this ad that New York City has because it establishes that following the squid, nobody wants to live there, understandably,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
it's this ad showing like, oh, you get to see all the great shows and live a fine life at a low price. We even have calamari, trying to make a joke at the squid when that's really just in bad taste. And
it was.
and we see that I talked about this last time, but Wade's second job is working like examining these focus groups because he can tell when people are lying like behind the glass like they always do at focus groups, and he sees that even though everybody gave it 5 stars, he goes, they just passed it. What I saw was fear.
Man, it. I honestly wish that we had more people like him getting to talk to these real life marketers who are coming out with uh, content for advertisements. Because if
Hmm.
somebody could speak real with them, like the way that Looking Glass did with these people, I think that there'd have been that Pepsi commercial wouldn't have existed
Right,
with
may have
you know
tested
it.
well, but you'll know when people are lying.
Yeah, and it's a good use of his job. It's a good use of his talents.
Hmm. And we see I've been calling it 11-2 throughout this whole show, and this episode is where that comes in because in this universe, 11-2 is basically 9/11 on steroids, and
Man,
following the squid drop, yeah, that absolutely would be the case. There's no way anything would ever be the same.
mm, no, not at all. Did it? I thought it was interesting that looking at the support group for 11-2 survivors, I'm guessing, or people who were impacted by 11-2. I thought that
Yes.
was interesting in how the operative of the cavalry, 7th Cavalry, came in. You know, the code word is you a friend of Captain Nemo's. Oh yeah, well, jump aboard, come on aboard. I thought, you know, for a group of people whose trauma lies around the image of a squid, you know, I think that's
Oh,
yeah,
that's that's interesting. I never caught up on that because Captain Nemo, that's 2,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
mm,
That's interesting.
I just seeing that I thought it was, you know, way to go, people of trauma. That's a nice way of tackling it. I think.
Yeah, and in that scene, well, one, it goes into The Leftovers, Damon Lindelof's HBO show before this, which is also amazing. That whole
Mm,
show revolves around trauma and like
mm,
the how society moves past like this really inexplicable, horrifying rapture type event. And I think this episode like sort of continues the themes on that in some ways. It very much feels like one of those episodes. And
mm,
also, the scene with the support scene, there's a black guy saying that I wasn't there at 11-2, but my family members were, and it's like I inherited their pain, which goes into the generational trauma of this whole season, and especially the next episode.
Which, when he mentioned that, I thought that was seeing it inside take effect inside the show and hearing it with my own ears. I thought that was pretty. I think that might have been the first time I had heard something like that in my conscious life. And hearing that, I thought that was interesting to come up from a Watchmen show. But that got me to thinking when he was talking like that.
Do you have anything to say about it? Because I know
Well,
I can't, but
there's a lot to reflect on it. And I kind of mentioned some of it in the last episode.
yeah.
Maybe even earlier here when I was mentioning, your legacy and how it's more inside your blood.
Right.
Finding out who your descendants or who your ancestors were and what they did. I don't think I could stress strong enough. It shows a lot it gives a lot of context as to the things that something that you decide to do. And hearing that, it kind of reminded me of, this friend of mine. I found out that, he's had interestingly enough, in the same branch of his family, he had Black Panther members and members of the NAACP. And to me, that kind of just seems, in reference to another comic, Brotherhood and X-Men from the Uncanny X-Men, the ways that one group of people could handle how they're being treated in two different ways, or in some case, several different ways. And who you've come from definitely has an impact as to what side of that table you're on. It makes a pretty profound connection to the real world to me.
Thank you. And we see Wade's house and how, just like Lori, with constantly going back to these Manhattan phone booths, even though she knows they're probably not even real or working. We see that Wade is a premium buyer of extra dimensional security equipment, and to the point where he runs and like an unstable amount of tests on his equipment, and that he has to call in a replacement because he broke it from too many tests.
Which is hilarious in itself. I think, at least, just the fact that you can kind of you could have heard it in the person that he was speaking with on the phone. It's like you said, you ran it over 500 times, and it it just kind of, me working as a cashier, it just kind of puts me in the mind of customer service resolution.
Right.
Just ridiculousness like that.
Yeah. And we also get another layer of his mask, because not only does it go back to his traumatic experience in the Hall of Mirrors, but it's also reflect a teen. It's this like foil he puts around his head to protect himself from any oncoming psychic blasts, which adds another dimension to his trauma and how he's never able to move past it.
That kind of put me on my ass when I made that connection. Because honestly, I thought it was from finding out about that in that episode compared to the first time that I saw his mask. The first time I saw the mask, I thought it was just a really cool material. Really cool material that had reflective properties. But learning more about him, and like you were saying, learning about his trauma and how he goes to work, in some cases work with the trauma, in some cases work against the trauma. It all kind of shows up in the fact that he's got the mask, and even in some of the other things that he wears.
Mm-hmm. Always goes back to what Lori said last time. People wear masks due to trauma. This is probably the most direct example of that.
Mm-hmm.
And we also see in his house that he sleeps in his bunker at all times. And when he was married, he had his wife do that too. So and we see with the scene where he meets up with his wife that she tried for 7 years to get him out of this, but he just couldn't. So of course the
Mm-hmm.
relationship and any relationship he had since just didn't work out.
Yeah, it's sad to see, especially seeing his reaction to her saying that, how she said she tried 7 years to get him out of it, and his response was, 7 years bad luck.
Mm-hmm.
For one, that's the telltale sign of superstition and breaking mirrors and everything. It's 7 years bad luck, and it makes me wonder just how painfully aware um, he is of it. It just kind of comes out to be a reminder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my mom was watching parts of this episode with me, and she said that's what a broken mirror looks like. She told me to say that here, and I just did.
Mm. Yeah, that's it's pretty. It's a profound statement, because that
Mm-hmm.
that is what I could imagine it would look like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Somebody who just wants other people to see themselves for themselves, and is working through that with some sort of trauma behind them.
Mm-hmm. So then after the meeting, this woman goes up to him and it seems to be going well. They go out for some drinks after the meeting, and it seems to go well. Like they have a lot of common because this woman says that she watched Pale Horse over 1,000 times, and
Mhm.
in universe instead of Schindler's List, Steven Spielberg made a movie about 11-2 called Pale Horse, both to the both due to the band that was playing at Madison Square Garden that day and the expression from the Bible, "Death rides on a pale horse."
Mhm.
And
I uh, I thought it was interesting. I remember seeing, was it a painting right after they made mention of that? It was a paint or a drawing or some. It was some work of art that the camera panned towards, or that it cut away to. Um, Maybe that
was
wasn't
that the
exactly in that.
was it the one at Judd's house?
Possibly, I believe it might. I believe it just might be, but
Yeah,
it was.
and we also
I
see
thought it was. Mhm.
we also see in the VIII scenes that he rides on a pale horse. So, and he killed all those people. So,
Yeah, seeing the real, like you said, when you made first mention of it in the first episode, I definitely tried to keep an eye out for it this time around. Just seeing the number and manner of things that are repeated, across the episode, and even in the same episode in some cases, um, and seeing that white horse almost everywhere, or the idea or symbolism behind the white horse.
right.
I really like seeing how that's coming into play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too. And in this conversation, we we also see that the woman lies to him, and Wade picks up on it. Yet,
Hmm.
yet throughout the whole thing, she's misleading him, but she never actually lies. That shows sort of
Hmm.
a weakness into his power of sorts. Because after the meeting, we see that the whole thing was a setup, to get Wade into the 7th Cavalry headquarters.
It was an elaborate setup at that. They
Mm-hmm.
even went along to hijack his communications.
Yeah.
I was pretty surprised in seeing that. All that sort of planning, that kind of preparation. And, I feel it's definitely got to take some sort of, if it takes special training to find out if someone is lying, it definitely takes some sort of even more special training to counter that. To
Right.
counter that kind of training. I thought that was pretty impressive too.
Right. And when he's going into this headquarters, we see that the church scene is a set, and that they always film in the videos. That's not actually at a church, so the police were never going to find it. And we see that they're experimenting with teleports, just because we see in the comic book that there's all sorts of developments with interdimensional travel, and we see that they're trying to do that with the basketball for themselves.
And I thought seeing how they went about carrying that out, even with just the random basketballs dropping everywhere, and one of those members just picked it up and logged the coordinates of where it landed and everything. I thought that was a pretty interesting peek into their process behind all that. Because
Yeah.
even to this point, I don't entirely know what the Cavalry's got planned, but they got several big ticket looks into. We got several big ticket looks into some of what they're doing, which
Right.
includes international travel
Yep.
and portals.
Yep. They're trying something. They're gonna do something new, as Keen says. And with that, Keen well, also, I'd like to say that this is the first time we see they use that opera clip in the score, and this is the only time it's used seriously. In the coming episodes, they use it again several times, and every time this kind of becomes a joke, like a meme of some sort.
Yeah, honestly, it started off when I first heard it. It kind of came off kind of meme-ish in the
Yeah,
first place, but then it very much got real very quick.
right. But when it comes back, we're definitely not supposed to take it seriously. It makes sure it makes sure of it. So then we
Nice.
see
I'm looking forward.
right. So then we see Keen here with the 7th Cavalry explaining everything, which the fact that he's even there means that whatever he said earlier was full of shit. Like, we know
Yeah.
that there was something wrong with him earlier in the last few episodes. And he explains here that the whole thing was just a setup between him and Judd to maintain the peace, meaning the whole thing was just an intentional stalemate, considering it, because the police were also run by racists the whole time. So that stalemate just proves that that the problems were never going to be solved if they got their way.
Yeah, it was pretty convoluted at first to listen to for me, but like you were saying later, as he was starting to speak more, it started becoming a bit more and more apparent that they're kind of running this, you know, mirror to the real world kind of institutionalization that
Mm-hmm.
just keeps them at top, keeps them, a few steps ahead of the public, and it kind of just it adds in to this sinister mystery that they've got about them.
Right, because the police are always going to frame themselves as the good guys when, as we always see in the news, it's demonstrably not true.
Mhm. It's like I said, I think it's a really interesting. I think it's a really nice mirror into the real world. This show is full of pretty good parallels, and only a year after all this stuff was aired here in 2020 is it becoming more and more relevant.
Right, it's aged like wine.
So it goes to show how well put together it's been.
Mm-hmm. So then we get to the scene where Keen, just like, and here's the scene in the comic book with VIII and the televisions. We see here Wade is looking at all these TVs of VIII telling Robert Redford what he's been doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to say the one sort of critique I have of this whole scene is that they never really come to terms with the 7th Cavalry being right about something, which, considering like all of the intentional parallels between like the 7th Cavalry and something like QAnon, it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
iffy because like that would imply that QAnon is right about something when they never are. So I would have preferred if they really like came to terms with that and said something about it, but they never really do. But other than that, the scene is great. This whole scene of
Yeah,
Vite it's just revealing everything that he was doing and just the saddest look on Wade's face, knowing that his whole life has been a lie. It's really sad and really scary. I love it.
I found myself really curious to see how he was going to, much like Topher, how I felt about Topher at first. I was curious to see how Will was going to walk away from learning that truth.
Right.
Towards the end of the episode when he thought to throw away the replacement system that he got, turns back around and gets it anyway. It kind of reminds you, sometimes even when people want to know the truth, they kind of still stay, in that one mode that was a bit more comfortable for him.
Right.
Or
He prefers what he know because he didn't want this whole thing to be a lie because he structured his whole life around it. So he chose to set up his EDS anyway, showing that he'll never want to would change those habits, even though it's all based in lies. And when he reluctantly sets Angela up, again, I say reluctantly because this was a very much a lose-lose situation for him. Like he says, defeated. Does anything matter? Is anything real? Just shows how
yeah,
crushed he was by all of this.
I know
And
he was that entire scene alone. I'm sure he was trying to search for something because I thought it was. I had a lot of respect for how he even went about uh, turning Angela in. Because it seems like he did that kind of. You know, I really am sorry for this by pulling up his mask right before that all happened. Um,
mhm.
it goes to show a lot about his character, and I'm glad that he's making that kind of that he decided to do it like that.
Yeah, because I was expecting him to get like indoctrinated into the 7th Cavalry after seeing that clip, but no, he never really does. Like his morality is like challenged, but it's never completely destroyed because he doesn't join the 7th Cavalry. Just at the end of the episode, they abduct him. They abduct him anyway. It wasn't by his nothing was by his own choice.
Which is sad, but
Hmm.
it goes to show a lot more about the the purity of his character, the
Yeah.
true the character foil of Will, and
Mhm.
I'm really really enjoying it so far.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a great character. Last thing I want to say about this episode is the fight scene, because we see this is where he finally shoots himself into space. And he's wearing the buffalo skin, meaning sometime in the last few years he succeeded in killing that buffalo and getting its skin, even despite what the game warden has warned him.
Mm-hmm.
And when he shoots himself into space, like we see that he was on some sort of moon this whole time, and he uses all of the corpses that he also flung into space to break them and send a message, some sort of message to a satellite with the words "Save me, D something." And when he does it
Yeah.
right on time, which he could tell when it was on time due to his watch onto his spacesuit. When he does it right on time, he goes, "I did it!" Just like he did in the comic book.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those Dexter's Lab aha moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this scene is equal parts just absurd and also morbid. Like, there's a whole lot. It makes me feel a whole lot of things.
It was really bizarre, and it kind of, to me, it seems like it seems like the epitome, the on-screen epitome of some of that lunacy that we keep bringing back up about him. You
Mm-hmm.
know, just it's one of his opuses, opie.
Yeah,
um, you know how he's gonna make his way out. You
right.
know.
And considering how this whole thing is staged, when he gets sucked back into this dome that he's been in, he like the game warden comes in saying that he broke the rules, and
Mm-hmm.
we see that VIII is going to spend the next 4 years essentially in prison, which, as we know, all of this is by choice. All of this is just something he's constructed for himself. And so the
Mm-hmm.
decision to put himself, we see in the next few episodes, put himself on trial and be in jail, like all that by choice is really interesting and goes into his guilt that he has for killing all these people.
Yeah, it made me wonder exactly how much redemption, if any, we'll be able to see from him,
Right.
because it shows it shows an edge of humanity that you didn't even really see about him in the comics, which I could only guess comes from doing time, even if it is, self-imposed. Um, Seeing how he reacts to it.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to talking about those next few segments because that's when it really like comes together, when it stops being a Looney Tune and like goes back to the themes of this character and what his personality is. So we'll see next time. Now let's talk about episode 6, the best one, and potentially the best superhero origin ever.
Man, let's
Because
get
this is
into it.
because this is both like the most accessible episode in that like it's the most like from a genre standpoint it's the most like a traditional superhero story, yet it's also the most angry and like politically confrontational of the entire run. For that reason, I think if you're only going to watch one episode, it should be this one because it kind of is like a standalone short film of sorts.
Mhm. For somebody who's familiar with the story of Watchmen, but hasn't, say for instance, has only read the comic or has only watched the movie, has an idea of who Hooded Justice is. 'Cause I think most people who, when they first see Hooded Justice, they wonder, what's this guy? Because he's so mysterious on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And this would be, like you said, like the perfect redirection. Hey, watch this episode. It's got most of what you're asking for. it,
Right.
it was it was nice. It was really interesting to see how Hooded Justice became, you know, real world grim Batman. You know, and
Mm-hmm.
exactly how and why he did that. He made that transformation.
Right. Because the comic book and all the subsequent comics, they're always like tiptoed around who Hood Justice is. That was always supposed to be some sort of mystery. But until this episode, which I consider to be his definitive origin.
Mm-hmm.
And I love how it begins with the American hero story depiction of the character because we
Man,
keep on seeing it throughout the series, and it just shows how much the public conscious surrounding this guy is just a bunch of lies and how
mm-hmm.
nobody knows the real history of this guy.
it's it's equal parts ironic and tragic. Um,
Hmm.
and it gives you those feelings for the actual truth of Hooded Justice and how Hooded Justice isn't exactly who the public imagines him to be. And then you turn around and see exactly what that means for Angela. I think it reminds me a bit of you remember the show Dexter, how he was pretending to be, or not how the police force and most of the media were referring to who Dexter actually is as the Bay Harbor Butcher, and he's walking around taking these, it's like, oh, so this is what people think of me. It's like, I'm such a popular thing that I influence other people to do that kind of stuff. Um, and the fact that he's not anything like what the police had pictured him up to be, or even the media had pictured him out to be. Um, and I guess I only say that because I've been watching Dexter recently. But like, there are plenty of other instances and other shows, other stories where the person on the headline isn't exactly who that person is.
Right. To the point where Hood Justice had to cover his eyes with makeup because
Hmm.
because of white supremacy, he couldn't actually be himself. He had to disguise himself as one of the white people. And as this episode describes, no, he was Will the whole time. Which
Hmm.
the setup for this episode is Angela is about to be arrested, and instead of going along with it, she swallows all of the nostalgia pills at once, which sends her into this coma where she essentially lives out Will's entire life in one sitting. And the entire episode is in black and white, except for the Tulsa Massacre flashbacks, which are more in like sepia. And it like has like this real like dream like vibe to it, and how like all of these memories are like colliding onto each other, which goes into how traumatic memories work. Just all of these like terrible events and neuroses pile onto each other, and how Angela is experiencing all of it goes back into the themes of generational trauma. Like, sure, she technically wasn't there, but she has inherited that pain.
Yeah, and the fact that she, through nostalgia, got to actually understand it, almost witness it firsthand, I suppose, given how
Yeah.
they say nostalgia works.
Mm-hmm.
It only goes to prove that there is a lot more to learn, and there is a lot more to glean from the past of your predecessors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So then the narrative begins with um um Will about to be on the New York City Police Department, and he's not, because he's black, he's not thanked like all the others. Instead, this one guy just goes up to him and says, "Beware of the Cyclops," which this whole episode comes to show how the police and the KKK always went hand in hand.
Mhm. Given the way that the police force was initially founded, it doesn't entirely shock too much.
No.
But what is shocking, I'd say, is how it's just so closely portrayed this way. That
Yeah.
even you don't even have to see that it's from a comic book to see how it's kind of to see the real world influences that come from it.
Right. Right. Considering how we've been talking about abolition a lot more this year and how the police originated through trying to capture and kill runaway slaves.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really not that much of a stretch to say they were always Klansmen.
It's like
And
what the senator said, and it's kind of like some that I hear from older people just all around. Yeah, we definitely need change, especially as far as the police force goes. But you can't go into the current system now and try and reform that because it's rotten from the inside now.
yeah,
There are
we need
good
something
seeds
else.
there. There are great officers, but there's not enough good officers.
The bad apples spoiled the bunch.
Hmm. Yeah,
So then
and
So then we see, first we see Will. He's married to the baby he picked up when he was a little kid at Tulsa. The two survivors, they have lived together this whole time, and there's several parallels of Rorschach with HJ throughout this episode because she always goes, "You're an angry, angry man, William Reeves." And just like Rorschach, yes, he is very angry because of how much he's been hurt.
yeah, and he never really owns up to it until crime fighting seems to be the way out. It seems to be the release. And I thought that was interesting looking at these expressions that you could see just through the eyes of HJ when he was going out and when he went out and was beating the shit out of those dudes.
Hmm.
Seeing how he just looking at how he reacted to all of it as it was happening. It kind of made me wonder. That probably has to be that kind of thrill that not too many heroes ever really want to own up to, but that they go out into the streets for.
Hmm. Yeah, we see he was inspired by the film he always watched as a child to the point where he took his name after that, Bass Reeves and Will Reeves, and trust in the law. That shows that he always had this desire to be a proper vigilante, since Lord knows the police aren't doing a good job.
Hmm. Looking into his interpretation of trusting in the law
Yes.
compared to how police traditionally try to go about doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And okay, so the first thing we see, well, I want to say that the score throughout this whole episode is amazing, both throughout
Hmm.
the original Reznor Ross music. There's a heavy jazz influence that really works for this episode, and also
Hmm.
some licensed music they use with Eartha Kitt and the Ink Spots, which I think is a bit of a Rorschach reference, using them specifically.
Yeah.
Mhm. And
Which Who was it that because it's a song that everybody is familiar with. The saxophone that was playing during Wade's Funhouse
Oh,
incident.
Careless Whisper.
Yeah. And I definitely loved how that song appeared throughout the episode. And how for some reason the slowed down version that came up after the squid,
Yeah,
it stuck with me.
that was
I
really
don't know why.
that was really off-putting.
Mm-hmm.
So the first
It's
So the first thing that Will does on his beat is meet up with this guy trying to burn down a Jewish delicatessen. His name is Fred. And
mm-hmm.
if you look into it, this guy is supposed to be Fred Trump,
Huh. Okay. I
which,
actually never.
yeah,
Wow.
I didn't know that when I first saw this episode, but when I looked more into it, yeah, it is him. And it lines up because in real life, Fred Trump was a Klansman.
Wow.
Yeah.
That doesn't entirely surprise me either. The way that this man, his son, goes about defending people.
Mm-hmm.
Not exactly condemning them, but not exactly thanking them.
Find
It's
people on both
that.
sides. We see, and we know this because he also has a truck saying FT and Sons. And
Hmm.
oh, Park, come in here.
Oh. What?
What do you want to say about the show?
I like the show. It's kind of disturbing at some points, but it's really good.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's real off putting a
Yeah,
lot, and it it's something that kind of it's one of those things where sometimes you find yourself wanting to close your eyes, but you kind of want to peek past the fingers just to see what's gonna. It's got at least my attention in that kind of way.
yeah.
Like,
I don't know, and I think it like it covers important issues, but it is kind of
yeah,
disturbing. Mm,
definitely that. I don't know. I guess looking at speculative fiction, science fiction, it'll put you on the spot for
Mm-hmm.
uh, sensitive topics like that, and how if you want to take a good hard look at it, you want to take a good hard look at changing that, then you really got to get into the nitty gritty of it because shit gets kind of ugly.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, do you want a hot dog or a hamburger?
Hamburger, but in a bit. Okay. So
Nice.
another funny Easter egg I found was towards the end of the episode, Fred Trump offers Will a steak, which
Mm-hmm.
goes into the stupid Trump steaks thing he was doing a few years ago, if you remember that shit.
I actually don't know. Mm-mm.
Donald Trump used to sell steaks at the Sharper Image. Of course, that didn't go well. It's one of his many failed ventures.
Man, one of many. The way that this man is went around, he's like Ed, and Eddie when it comes to money scams. Like it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. I guess. I am personally really tripping out to find this all out about his dad showing up as a target in the Watchmen series.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm personally just eating that up.
Yeah. See, Hooded Justice straight up kill this guy.
Mm-hmm.
So then,
And
so after
not
that,
cold blood.
sorry.
Go ahead.
So then after that initial encounter, Will takes him into the station. And of course,
Mm.
the guy at the desk doesn't want to take him in. But instead, these other cops come in and are like, thank you, Will. We'll take it from here.
Yeah.
And this goes into the OK symbol that the alt-right co-opted. Again, another like internet reference within this universe.
man, and seeing that it when I saw that right there at that scene in the booking scene, it kind of started something in me because it very much seems like one of those don't ask, don't tell
Yeah.
kind of things, and seeing how the officer behind the desk was so strongly encouraging HJ to not pursue. You
Yeah.
know, it's
Please
kind of
go
like fear
home. I'm
of
trying to
self.
help you.
Yeah, it only kind of makes me wonder all that more about good cop bad cop relations even in the real world because there's more than just those two. There's also some of these other people who are too afraid to, for some reason or another, are scared out of intervening. And
Right. If you don't
it's
stand up
so
to the
much so.
bad ones, you're just as bad, you know?
And it's like I said, just another one of those mirrors that I think when people watch, I feel like they've got to feel has a connection, even if they don't really like actively know the situation with police, which I don't imagine anyone who does it these days. But even if you had no idea of what the police are doing in the real world today, I'm sure that would ring something up, just from how they're going about conducting this kind of business. And you see how, law enforcement handles certain individuals in real life these days. Like,
Hmm.
oh, we'll just let them off, or they're back on the streets, or
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah. And of course, these same cops drive up to Will when he's walking home, saying, "Hey, want to get a drink with us?" While
Hmm.
while in the nostalgia memories, like they're dragging black corpses out on the street, just like in Tulsa, showing us that their evil motives. And
Hmm.
when Will tries to go into the alley, they say, "You know what? Another time's not going to do it for us." And there's this
Yeah.
really disturbing scene where they straight up hang him and almost kill him.
Hmm. And at first, I was call it a slow moment for me, but watching that, I was definitely put off for a moment because a lot of the times, just coming from a black perspective, you kind of see something like that, you imagine there's no way that the person is getting down,
Yeah.
and just the fact that he actually did make it across, I it's one of those things where you know I'm so used to hearing about black fatality so much that something like that come around and he ended up surviving, even if he is in this case a fictional character, is like a breath of fresh air.
Right.
There's no real life stakes to whether or not hooded justice became hooded justice or not, but seeing the fact that he was, I don't even want to say spared because it was just some sort of tactic, some sort of motive
Scare
that
tactic.
these, yeah, but the fact that that wasn't the end of him there, just it rang an air of relief to me, despite the fact that we're watching the show about his granddaughter. So it was proof that he made it through. It's just one of
Yeah.
those teeth biting things for me.
Yeah. Um, and I would like to say that scene is the only time they ever use the N word, meaning
Hmm.
that you can talk about race and racism without resorting to those cliches of just constantly using the N word for shock value, a la Django Unchained. You know,
Yeah.
they only used it when there was actual intent behind it. It turns out they only had to use it once.
Hmm.
I'd also
And
like to
it's
say, ooh, sorry.
no, I was just gonna say, just looking into that as far as the racism goes, like it just reminds you that there's different types of racism. There's some that's, all in your face and excessive, like a Tarantino film,
Right.
and then there's some that's, you know, works right next to you and is buddy buddy and doesn't show until they actually, act. But
Right.
that's it. What were you saying?
Oh, going off of that, we actually in my one of my classes recently reread Claudia Rankine's Citizen, which is
Mm,
this poem about how microaggressions and macroaggressions against Black people are essentially the same thing. That was a really good
yeah.
read, and I would like to say how this episode sort of co-ops what Hooded Justice costume means, because in the original comic, it's very much like a Klansman type costume, and
Mm,
Moore was specifically pointing out a parallel between superheroes and white supremacy. But in this episode, knowing the context behind that and how this character was not a white supremacist, but actually a victim of white supremacy, just that like
mm.
hooded noose costume has a very different message now.
It does. And I honestly, me personally, I kind of have a bit of a vindictive nature. So seeing that and how Hooded Justice is how he's just rocking that whole look. I like that whole that edge. Me personally, I
Yeah.
think that that's like pretty badass to
Mm-hmm.
to wear your trauma, to wear your damage, the result of other people's hate, and use it as the reason somebody should be careful with what they do around you. I think it's pretty impressive, and it's not exactly something that too many people would be able to pull off. And it kind of ties into to the name of the episode. An extraordinary being.
Yeah.
Eh, he's just going around just killing shit. Not literally. Well, maybe knocking out shit, but he's going around tossing people around. And
Yeah.
he's doing a damn good job at it. And he's mostly doing it for himself, for his own, I suppose, his own mission.
Yeah. And that title, this extraordinary being, that goes into the under the hood segments in original Watchmen, the Hollis Mason accounts of Hooded Justice, because everything that was mentioned in that book in original Watchmen happens in this episode. It's in some shape or form.
Yeah, yeah. And
And even, oh, sorry.
I was just gonna make note of the the skewed nuances between how Will's memories go compared to the events of Watchmen, compared to the events of American Hero Story. Like the three
Yeah.
different retellings of them, and it I like how they kind of teach you, they kind of show more about each other.
Mm-hmm. Shows how obscure the truth was.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a game of telephone, like how often like the roots of the story are still there, but the context like is completely gone until you finally see this true origin in the episode.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's also pretty interesting because the one thing that may not make sense if you read the comic book and seeing this new version is that in the original Watchmen, Hooded Justice was a Nazi. Like he repeatedly express support for Hitler and the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
But the show just kind of explained that, because episode 2 had that whole thing where he was influenced by pro-black Nazi propaganda,
Mm-hmm.
and even this episode he looks at like Nazi newspaper clippings and puts them on his wall, showing that
Yeah.
like So in like, yeah, that support of sorts is still there, but it's because he got the wrong idea through that propaganda sheet that he read as a kid, you know? So it still does line up, just the context is different.
Yeah, it's not exactly. It's not the context that you'd imagine.
Yeah.
Not at all by a long shot. And
Yeah.
that also ties in a bit more to that edge, I guess, that I like in his character. Because he seems to be, by all accounts, anti-American white. Because even very obviously, America was at war against the Nazis in
Yeah.
World War II. So they're probably not too friendly. While they may have some matching ideologies, they don't exactly stand foot to foot. And
Right. Of
it's
course we know
Mhm.
in hindsight that the Nazis were terrible, but if he's being oppressed in America while at the
Mhm.
same time, like, why wouldn't he be interested in what the other side is doing, especially when he read that sheet at such a young age, Of course he has the idea that things are better over there, even though that's not exactly true.
which is something else that I've seen in across like black identities in some cases is how, because of how we as a people have been treated, the alternatives for where to go, because you can look into it and there, as far as like black writers, there are some black Canadian writers, whose ancestry has American roots. Same thing with, a handful of black people in European nations. While, of course, they're probably black people in Europe have probably little American history involved with them. They're probably from other places, or they're probably from the nations that they're in. But in some cases, there are, you know, there's been escaped slaves who've made it overseas to places like France or the UK, uh, hell, in some cases even like Russia, um, and they go about living a non-American uh, segregation type of life. They live something more like a European old world kind of life.
That's really interesting because, yeah, I'd imagine considering how much of a death grip America has on the rest of the planet, it goes into how American history is essentially world history, you know?
It's kind of got its claws in a little bit of everything
Yep.
in some way or another.
Yep.
So much so that it divides and helps people that it's citizens with their identity.
Mm-hmm. And so then we get the fight scenes with Hooded Justice on the job, again mirroring what Hollis Mason described in Under the Hood. And it's
Hmm.
fantastic because the whole episode, and especially these scenes, the cinematography and score feels like the movie Birdman, in that it's these long takes, like swooping around with the jazz like backdrop. It really creates
Hmm.
a feeling of intensity in these fight scenes that really make it feel close to home.
Yeah, definitely. I like, who doesn't first of all really appreciate a good fight scene, a good
Yeah.
action scene, and my mind just can't stop going back to that scene where Hooded Justice goes out there and saves a couple from a group of people mugging them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the shiniest kick beat down. He takes a couple of licks and everything, but for a spur of the moment kind of instance. It was really beautiful to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because saving a couple from being mugged, that's a very like stereotypical superhero action, but the way everything is presented, it makes it feel like it's the first time you've ever seen something like it.
Yeah, which honestly, when you frame it like that, I'm actually reminded of how you can take something that predictable, like that almost you want to say cliche,
Mm-hmm.
and reinvent it. Because a lot of the time somebody would see that and they'd kind of roll their eyes, just like, oh, that's it's just some guy coming into his origin story. They wouldn't think too much of it, but following everything that Wade was getting into before that, it definitely it makes you feel alive. It
Mm-hmm.
makes you feel alive. Yeah, you like to see it.
Right, and that scene with the newsstand, the guy reading Action Comics #1, that again
Hmm.
goes into this whole like idea of Will as like a Superman figure, because I mentioned in the first episode how the Tulsa massacre lines up with with Krypton getting destroyed and both Will and
Hmm.
Clark being set off to this new world. So
Yeah,
that goes back to it.
sure enough, it does, and I'm sure. What I was interested in was seeing his face while the plot was being described to him,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm sure that was the face of making a connection like that.
Yeah.
And I guess that's just credit to to acting, because it's I'm sure it takes actually going through that perspective to run it through. I thought it was just really nice to see.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So then Nelson comes into the apartment and like figures out that Will is Hooded Justice and he wants him to join the Minutemen.
Hmm.
And just like as described in the comic book and in American Hero Story, they have super sex, which is something which was something that was always a factor in original Watchmen. And even like as far back as Wonder Woman, because that definitely had like a bondage influence with the lasso of truth and all that stuff going on.
Hmm.
And
And it no, go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
do you want to say something?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so and just like with the comic books, it shows that he's bi, maybe even gay, because his relationship with Nelson is much stronger than that with his wife. And despite the great connections they're having with sex, it's also clear that Nelson like loves him, but is also a bit too bigoted to fully support him, because
Hmm.
Will tries bringing up his escapades with the Minutemen, but they don't want to do it because that they don't think that's good enough for the press. Instead, they're doing the stupid stuff with Moloch. So similar to what Darwin Cook did in the Minutemen comic with Silhouette's ring of crime that she's undercovering. It's just too gritty, too risque of sorts for the Minutemen to actually do, showing how worthless of an organization they were.
Hmm. And it kind of brings you to the mind of just the idea of a coalition of heroes, like the Avengers or the Justice League,
Yeah.
and it's what I thought was interesting is hearing what he had to say to him about. I'm forgetting what the words exactly were, but he's like, "Yeah, you fighting for black rights is your own fight. We can't help with that." And the fact
Yeah,
that he
that's
said
really
that out
upsetting.
loud, that was that's kind of been like the subject of discussion, in like certain groups that I've like taken part of. It's just like, yeah, even if we did have a group of superheroes, you know, who's to say that they actually would want to help us? They'd probably, it's too hot for TV. It's this and that. You know, so
right.
I don't know. It just it was interesting to see, like I said, just the manner of things that get actually spoken, brought up in this that you wouldn't really think was gonna get brought up in film or on screen.
Right. And to go into what Will undercovers, what Cyclops is doing is that what they're doing is they're using mesmerism in film projectors to manufacture black unrest, showing that any sort of like police reports of like or like news statings of black unrest was actually part of this racist conspiracy that Cyclops made happen on purpose, which goes into the crime buster scene in original Watchmen because black unrest is something that Nelson brings up as an evil they need to fight against, showing that how wrong of an idea he always had about it.
I'm sorry, say that again.
This goes into how in the original comic during the crime buster scene, Nelson lists black unrest as something they need to fight against, which showing how this episode black unrest was never really a thing. It was all just part of this racist conspiracy that Cyclops engineered, shows how much of the wrong idea everybody has and how damaging it was to everybody's view of black people.
And it definitely doesn't help that that it's got a few real world influences on that too. A few real world mirrors to it. Some people who are, I think it's interesting as the people who say that they're willing to help aren't the ones who actually end up helping. It's usually the ones that you hear about. You know, there's talking about it, then there's actually doing it. And those are two different groups of people, it seems.
Yeah, anyone can say they're going to help, but that doesn't mean they're going to do it.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Like I said, just how frank they were about that in the show is baffling to me.
Yeah, I agree. So Will figures it out all by himself and goes in there and just kills everybody. And just like Rorschach sets the whole thing on fire and watches the building burn.
Which, you know, that scene in itself I thought was incredible too. Just that look of wonder in his eyes, it seems, from watching that fire and how he had the flashback to everything back in his childhood. I just that hint, that spark, that spark of like little pyromania, watching something start over again, or you know, making something like that official next step into something. You know, by way of fire. I thought was really powerful scene.
Yeah, because Rorschach in chapter 6 said something similar when after the Roche incident. He says, stood in firelight, swirling bloodstain on new chest like map of violent new continent. Stood in the street, watched it burn, watched for an hour.
What? Oh. Sorry about that. Yeah, I definitely the idea of sitting back and watching something burn or watch it like fall down. I definitely love hearing Rorschach have that sentiment, you know, in a film, you know, and seeing it actually come to fruition by way of, you know, not vigilante justice exactly, but you know, fighting crime on a street level, I'd say. Playing the game how they play it. It's something. It's a nice connection to see because a lot of the times, what's publicized is, kind of what we were talking about earlier, Justice League level, ethical, you know, subdue the person and put them in jail. Just a very clean white collar way of handling it compared
Mm-hmm.
to, the stuff that I actually make it on the news and would put impressions into people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's an interesting, like I said, an interesting connection to put together.
Right. Right.
The idea of true heroism.
Right. And also goes into like protesting that we've seen in the past and especially this year, and how when people are unheard, destruction has to be their only language, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, because after a while, it is. It's not like it's just something that is the first option for someone to jump up and get into. No, it comes after trying to do things peacefully. Trying to do things, in a way that would uh, try to do things bureaucratically. Being very civil about things doesn't always work,
Nope.
and sometimes you gotta shock a couple of people in order to get I don't want to say a proper reaction, but to get
Any sort of point across, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So all the more reason that I love seeing that.
So the last two scenes are when Will goes back to the house, he sees his son try to dress up like him, to which he responds in fear because he does not want his son to go into that lifestyle. Being a superhero is not fun for him. He's wearing a mask because he's scared and angry and hurt. He doesn't want his son to
Yeah,
do that, but it seems inevitable.
man, and it like I think it makes perfect sense for a parent to do that. Like I feel like parents do that already in the real world, and in other fictional universes, stories as well. You know, parents don't want their kids to be them.
Right.
They at the very least they want them to be better than them. At the very most, they want them to to do their own thing, become their own person. See what that turns out to be,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing how HJ took that when he saw his son. For honestly, it reminded me a lot of, strangely enough, what you would hear a rapper say. If that rapper would happen to have a family, which is like, that person makes all sorts of, horrible remarks in their music and everything. And then you ask them, like, well, do you let your daughter listen to your stuff? What does your daughter have to say about the last album? Like, oh, my children don't listen to my music. I don't let them. And it's just, they
Interesting.
don't want them to be, I guess that sort of person that they had to be to make those songs, or they don't want them to be the type of, like a rapper wouldn't want his daughter to be the type of girl that he raps about in these songs, type of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
seeing something like that show up in a hero context, I'm sure it could have been a point that like Marvel could have made, what with Tony Stark and his daughter Morgan in the film, the MCU film. Uh, it's just like, yeah, I'm out here, risking life and trying to protect my identity to, keep balance in the house and in the world. But you definitely shouldn't want to try and jump towards something like that. But what else can you expect from the kid of a hero? They're gonna have some sort of virtuous ethics that came from their parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the last scene, it catches up to the present with Will showing how he used mesmerism to make Judd hang himself, showing how in doing so, it's telling us how the Cyclops conspiracy effectively never went away. It just kept on going through different phases,
Man, and in that whole scene, I was definitely surprised a lot by the mesmerism and how he, just with the matter of suggestive tones and a strobe light, was able to enact the same kind of scene that he had been watching and rewatching over and over again since he was a boy.
Mm-hmm.
But what I thought was, strangely enough, even more interesting than that was how Judd was put almost a bit in the place of Eddie Blake.
Yeah.
When the drop of blood landed on his badge.
Yeah, both stories begin with a murder,
Mm-hmm.
and that unveils like the deeper connections going on in real life.
Mm-hmm. I definitely thought it was. I love seeing that connection, and I love seeing the recurring motifs. When you mentioned that, like I said, in the first podcast,
Mm-hmm.
I definitely kept an eye out for it. And there are even some things like the blood on the badge that might not be a motif so much as it is a symbol.
Yeah.
Something that connects a lot of this together.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, it's kind of retells the same story in a different lens.
Yes,
And I think it's all
exactly.
beautiful to see together.
Yeah, exactly. So then Angela wakes up in Lady True's hospital bed, and that's the perfect
Mhm.
setup for the next episode, which we'll get to next time. Anything else you want to say?
Not much. Thanks again for having me talk with you. I really enjoy getting to go in on this. And
So
I'm
do
glad
I.
you told me about it in the first place.
Of course, yeah. So am I. I'm glad you're here. We'll do it again next time.
All righty.
All right.
Well,
See ya.
catch you later.
See
See
ya. Goodbye, everybody.
ya.